ahead. Thanks.
So we had a basically almost like a political cartoon, and our students had to. There's a lot of different things they had to do. It's almost like a math problem where there's multi-steps. So in this particular case, they had to do some recall to understand what the legislative branch was, what the executive branch was, but then they had to do some analysis or application, maybe even some synthesis to come up with the correct answer. And we all really had some different ideas about where it would end up on that chart. So we hovered between a DOK3 and a DOK2. And talking with Mark, they're actually have some medium, high, and low ranges within those DOK numbers as well. So it could be at the higher level of DOK2, but the lower level of DOK3. And so that's kind of where we ended up, kind of in between the 2 and the 3. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect. Right. Yep, and that's perfect. I've seen some of the math ones that are labeled that way, where it actually labels it as a 1, 2. So, good, thank you.
We have one that has a student that is showing an estimation problem, and they have a sample of what a student did. And then they had to decide if the student did it correctly and support it with reasonings, and if they didn't do it correctly, how should it be done correctly. And because it had so much support your answer with justification, we labeled it a 3.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you. All right, you guys.
We did one in math on ratios and proportions, and because it involved a little more reasoning than the step 1, we pretty much, because it had, they had to reason why and think through a couple steps, we just said it would be 2.
Okay, great. Thank you. You guys?
Ours was on soils and mixtures of particles of different sizes and how the water moves through the soil at different rates. And they had to look at a chart. We had said that it was a 3 because of the analyzing. They had to explain why this change would result in slower drainage. So they had to look at the chart and also look for general patterns.
Thank you. All right, you guys?
We had a piece where the kids had to read and then respond in writing. It asked them to use details from the text to explain how time and memory are used to structure the story. We said that it was a level 3 because they had to use details to explain and then support their inferences that they made. But we also felt that most of our students would probably only operate at a level 2, therefore giving them a lower score on the rubric.
Thank you. You guys?
We had a math problem where they had to figure out the perimeter of 3 different shapes and then compare numbers. So we said it was a level 2 since there's more than one step, and they had to compare and explain their answer.
Great. Thank you. Who is the volunteer?
We had a math problem where they had to add fractions with uncommon denominators. And they had to just pick the equation that was true, so they were already done for them. We put it as a level 1 because we figured that they just needed to evaluate the expressions and recall principles that they'd learned about that.
Last but not least.
We had a story problem that involved division. And it was a pretty simple problem, but then after looking over the rubric, we're thinking it may be a 2 based on the select a procedure because they had to choose what operation to use to solve the problem. So maybe a low 2.
Well, thank you guys all for doing this. Again, this was more about just getting you guys diving into the charts and then looking at an assessment item at the same time. And what we're going to be doing next is actually giving you the instruction around the ins and outs of what each of the levels is. and we do that kind of with a little bit of a caution. It's not necessarily so much that you become ninjas on 1 versus 2 versus 3 versus 4, and they live in these silos and never the two shall meet. It's more about the conversations that you had, diving into, again, similar to that first task that we did, which is, what is it that we want? What are our outcomes that we want, kids? Are we just applying a procedure, which is what they were looking at in the back with adding fractions? Or do we want kids, is the standard that we're trying to teach, telling us that the kids have to do something deeper with it, creating an argument around it? Do they have to do reasoning around it? Do they have to make a conjecture? It's a big fancy word. What is it that they're supposed to be doing? And when you can figure that out from your learning targets, then you know how to create the appropriate type of question on your assessment. So that was kind of the purpose of this. Now, I think at this point I turn it over to Mark.